Hi, this is attorney Joe Fieschko, and today I want to talk about bankruptcy. Bankruptcy has a long history in our country. Robert Morris, who is a friend of George Washington and a local university is named after him, he actually spent time in debtor's prison in England because it was a crime to not pay your debts. But how could you earn money to pay your debts if you're sitting in prison? So the founders decided that was a bad idea, and we now have bankruptcy. Uh, the Supreme Court said the purpose of bankruptcy is to give you a new opportunity in life and a free field for future effort unhampered by the pressure and discouragement of pre-existing debt. Some of the famous people that filed bankruptcy: Abe Lincoln, he filed in 1833. P.T. Barnum filed in 1877. Henry Ford filed in 1901. Mark Twain in 1894. And believe it or not, Walt Disney filed in 1923. So the whole idea is to clear your debts and give you an opportunity to move forward. One of the problems with the country of China is they don't have bankruptcy. And that discourages people from taking risks, discourages people from spending, and that is one of the major sources of the problem with their economy right now. So bankruptcy kind of seems too good to be true. Essentially, you go through some very simple procedures and your debts are gone. The question for anyone is a question of mathematics. Basically, what you have to do is put your income in one column and put your expenses, which would include payments on your debts, in the other column. Now, you know that you're not going to be spending more than your income. So if you can't pay your debts and you keep borrowing money to pay the prior debts, robbing Peter to pay Paul, then you are not being productive to anyone, including your creditors. So here are the basics. I charge $1,200 to file bankruptcy. That's the entire fee. The court charges $335, which is the filing fee for the bankruptcy petition. So the total cost is $1,535. There's no further costs involved. Once you decide to file bankruptcy, whether it's after listening to this program or whether it's after you see me in the office or talk to me on the phone, you stop paying your debts immediately. Obviously, if you make any further payments after you decide you're going to file bankruptcy, then you're just throwing your money away. So that's how it begins. The procedure is simple. After you pay me, and during the time period that you are paying me, you refer your creditors to me so that they have to go through me. They can't really talk to you directly under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So when you're finished paying me, I mail you your bankruptcy petition with a letter to go over it at home and schedule the second appointment. And then we sit down, make sure it's perfect, and we file it. 1 month after we file the bankruptcy, you have your hearing. They call it a first meeting with creditors, but frankly, no creditors ever appear. It's now by telephone. During COVID, they started doing it by telephone. Now that COVID's over, basically, they realized that was a simpler way to do it. So there's one hearing. It is by telephone. The person conducting it is a trustee, not a judge. The trustee is a bankruptcy lawyer from Greensburg. And it's very short. They schedule around 8 hearings per hour. So they're figuring it's going to take 5 minutes to 10 minutes. They ask you very basic questions. I will be on the telephone from my office. You'll be on the telephone from your home. and it's a very simple hearing. Uh, During the time period you're in bankruptcy, there are two credit counseling sessions you have to take part in. One occurs right before you file bankruptcy. It costs about $19. Again, it's by telephone. It takes about 15 minutes, and I need a certificate to file the bankruptcy. The second one, you have about 2 months after you file bankruptcy to do it. That generally takes a bit longer. And that one, they charge you $9 to do. So those are the only additional fees in addition to the court cost and the attorney's fee. After you file the bankruptcy petition, a freeze goes into effect on your creditors. It stops sheriff sales, for example. Sometimes people come in and say, I've got a sheriff sale next week. Well, if we file bankruptcy before that, it stops the sheriff sale. It stops lawsuits. It stops telephone calls. It stops utility terminations. We notify the utility to let them know that you filed bankruptcy, and that stops it. And then everything before the bankruptcy is discharged. You get a new account number. You give them a security deposit, and you have your utilities go on uninterrupted. Most people continue to pay their mortgages and pay their car payments. Then you can keep the car, keep the home, doing it that way. Sometimes people have decided that buying a car was a bad idea, or that specific car. Let's say you bought a Cadillac and you've got an $1,100 a month payment. You're saying to yourself, wish I hadn't done that. Well, the short answer there is by filing bankruptcy, you can walk away from the deal. If you try that outside of bankruptcy, normally the car gets repossessed. They will sell it for a fraction of its actual value, and you have a gigantic bill. But in bankruptcy, you can walk away from that. Similarly, sometimes people have homes that have deteriorated. They owe more than they're worth. They can't keep them up. They don't want them anymore. Again, you can simply sign the home over to the mortgage company. It's called a deed in lieu of mortgage foreclosure. Or if you allow the foreclosure to go through, then you live there until the sheriff's sale. You give them the keys and sweep the front porch, and off you go. So there are limits to filing bankruptcy. It's not for rich people. The income limit in the state of Pennsylvania for a single person, your yearly income cannot exceed $60,640. Now, there's an alternative called Chapter 13 that I'll get into if you have income over that. For a single person, it's $60,640. For a married couple, $74,805. Married couple with one kid, $92,441. And if you're a married couple with two children, you can earn up to $110,077. So it increases with the family size. And of course, the bigger your family goes after that, it continues to increase. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the income limits. The other limitation is on property. These are called exemptions. These came in 1977. Before 1977, people lost everything in bankruptcy. Congress thought that was a bad idea, so they set these exemptions. And you have an exemption for your automobile, your household goods and furnishings, clothes, tools, jewelry, life insurance policies. There's a $1 million exemption for a 401k. So if you have substantial retirement funds, those are exempt. The idea there was that in our society now, 401ks have basically replaced the monthly payments that people used to get for pensions. and Congress didn't want people losing their pensions when they filed bankruptcy. The most important exemption is in your house. The exemption is about $23,000 per person. So if you own a house by yourself, the exemption's $23,000. If you own it with your spouse, it's double that, or $46,000. And here's the way that exemption works. Let's say you have a house worth $100,000 and you owe $70,000 on it. That means your equity is $30,000, and that puts you within the allowed $46,000 range. So if you're within that range, you keep your house. Otherwise, again, you have to probably consider what's called a Chapter 13. Also, if you don't own a house, in addition to the exemptions that I listed, there's also an exemption of about $11,500 in anything, like if you own a boat or a camper or something like that. Now, I have been describing Chapter 7 bankruptcy, that's straight bankruptcy. The other alternative is Chapter 13. Let me talk to you about that for a moment. We don't file a Chapter 13 unless we have to, and sometimes you have to. There are advantages to a Chapter 13. Basically, it's a 60-month plan. And if you are, let's say, $20,000 over your allowed exemption, then you have to pay $20,000 towards your secured debt or unsecured debt during those 60 months. You don't get off scot-free. You have to get into the payment plan. If you are over the income limit, let's say that you're a single person with income of $70,000, again, you have to pay a percentage on your unsecured debt to get over the 5 years. There is no interest accruing. Let's say that you have $100,000 in unsecured debt. Sometimes you'll pay maybe $20,000 on that. And again, at the end of the 5 years, you are paid in full. So it's a little more difficult than a Chapter 7, which is fast and easy. Chapter 13 is a little more involved, but some people have to do that. Chapter 13 is especially good for certain problems. For example, let's say that you fell far behind on your mortgage. Maybe you're on strike. Maybe you were laid off for a year. So maybe you're $10,000 behind on your mortgage. They're about to sheriff sale your property. By filing a Chapter 13, you stop the sheriff sale, and you get 5 years to catch up on your mortgage. And normally, the trustee, and they have a trustee in 13 too, will do a wage attachment and attach the same amount of money each month in order to catch up on your mortgage. Tax problems. Taxes are not dischargeable in bankruptcy, but if you have problems with the IRS, by filing a Chapter 13, you actually can even stop the IRS, which is a little amazing. Your interest and penalties stop accruing as of the day that you file. And again, you have to catch up over 5 years. Now, one of my friends is a tax attorney, and sometimes he will send clients to me who have not been able to have a voluntary payback program with the IRS that would be successful. Frankly, sometimes when I get people with tax problems that I can't handle, I will send them to my friend who's a tax attorney, so it can go either way on that. Student loans. There's been a lot of talk about student loans lately, but one way we've always been able to handle them is in a Chapter 13. In a Chapter 13, there's different ways to handle it. If you can handle your student loan while discharging your other debts, sometimes we can discharge all the debts accept the student loan, and then you just keep the normal payment going throughout the Chapter 13. Sometimes the student loan is a problem. I have represented young doctors, young lawyers, people like that. Sometimes they'll have $200,000 in student loans, and that would be an enormous monthly payment. And when you're just starting out in one of those fields, you're not making a lot of money. Those people can, frankly, pay what they can afford for 5 years. And then 5 years later, hopefully, if you're an attorney or a doctor, you're making some decent money and you can pay them under the normal agreement. Why do people get into trouble financially? I think you probably know. Probably overspending is the biggest item. We are big spenders here in America, and one day you wake up and you see your budget and you can't pay them. Well, you wind up in bankruptcy. Loss of income. You know, we live in a capitalistic society, which is the only kind of society that works. But sometimes you lose income, and when you could afford to pay your debts, well, you can't anymore. So that's another reason. Some people have health problems that lead to a loss of income. Um, this is a funny one, and I've had this over the years. Gamblers. You foolishly gambled away a lot more money than you have, and you owe a lot of debts. Those debts can be discharged. Uh, Often it's a bad business. That's very common. Honestly, 2 out of 3 small businesses in America or any country fail, and sometimes you're left with a lot of debt. You can do that. A common one here in Fayette County is you co-sign for your kids. Commonly, you co-sign for a car for your kid, and the kid doesn't make the payments, and you get a call from your child, and he says, well, it just got repossessed, and then you get a bill for $15,000. Well, you got to do something about that, and bankruptcy is often the solution to that. And finally, medical bills. A lot of people have health insurance now, more than in the past, but a lot of times we'll wind up with large medical bills. I had a client a few years ago who had a heart problem, and he goes to the hospital, and they say, well, we've got to life flight you to Pittsburgh. And he said, no, you don't. No, you don't. But they stuck him on anyway. They life flighted him to Pittsburgh, and the hospital there said, what the heck are you doing here? He got a bill for $18,000, so he had to file bankruptcy because of that. So anything can happen. This is a good way to get you out of it. The kinds of debts you can discharge, obviously, unsecured loans or even secured loans if you relinquish the collateral. Credit cards, medical bills. Oh, judgments. Sometimes people will have judgments against them. I can actually take the judgment off of your house through what's called a lien avoidance, and you'll get clear title to your house if you have a judgment. Car repossessions we've talked about. Once in a while, I'll have a person come in who lost their driver's license because they got in an accident that was their fault and they didn't have insurance. So State Farm or some other insurance company sues them for what they wound up paying. They get an enormous judgment against them, and the state of Pennsylvania takes your license. Well, if it was from drunk driving, I can't help you. That's not dischargeable. But if it was just a normal accident, by filing bankruptcy, the state of Pennsylvania actually gives your license back. And again, some people are over their heads with car payments, 1 or 2. Some people are overhead with their mortgages. So again, you can let the house go or the car go and get a fresh start. There is another important way that bankruptcy can be used. We usually have this situation where one of the spouses was in business. I had years ago, I had a guy that had a small trucking company, and he lived over in Bedford County. And he came in, and he was older, and he and his wife owned their home together in joint names, and it was worth about $600,000, and there was no mortgage on it. But he came in and he had $1.2 million in debts because the trucking company failed. Under what are called the state exemptions, instead of that laundry list of things you can keep anything that's in joint names. So we filed bankruptcy. We went to that was when they were in person. We went up to Altoona in front of Jim Walsh, who was the trustee. He knew the guy was keeping a $600,000 house. He had no problem with it because that is the law. So that is what the state exemptions are all about. Some more things about bankruptcy. You can do it once every 8 years. Normally, people only do it once because they are well chastened and they're more careful in the future. But that can be true. There are certain debts that are what are called non-dischargeable. We've talked a little bit about some of them. You can't discharge most taxes, although there is a exception. If you have a tax for which you file a return, and that's normally federal income tax or state income tax. So if it's a kind of tax where you filed a return for, and you filed a timely return, if 3 years has gone by since the date it became due, and taxes become due April 15th, the year after you incur the tax, if 3 years goes by, you can actually discharge that kind of tax. So normally taxes are not dischargeable. People do ask, well, how about the property taxes if I give up the property? These don't follow you. They stay with the property. IRS and state taxes, if they're over 3 years old, can be dischargeable. Otherwise, taxes are not dischargeable. You have to pay them after bankruptcy, or again, if you need time to pay them, you file a Chapter 13. Criminal fines and student loans, or criminal fines, of course, are not dischargeable. Student loans we talked about, you cannot discharge them, but you can deal with them in bankruptcy by filing a Chapter 13. Let's see. Oh, child support. Can't discharge child support. So if you have child support or spousal support, that of course is non-dischargeable. So that is all about bankruptcy. This is a federal law. There's very little variation from state to state. It's a fairly inexpensive way to deal with what can be large problems. And if you want to call me regarding bankruptcy, my number is 1-800-242-2412. We talk to you for free. If you shouldn't do it, and sometimes that happens, I will say you shouldn't file bankruptcy, you shouldn't even file a Chapter 13. Then I can suggest other alternatives. I don't like debt consolidations. They usually don't work, especially if you put a lien on your house to do it. Years ago, it was easier to negotiate with creditors quite often. For example, I had a fellow years ago that found himself about $100,000 in debt, and he could not file bankruptcy. And I negotiated with all of the creditors, and they wound up taking 30 cents on the dollar. And we still get those offers sometimes from creditors. But again, in my view, if you file bankruptcy and just erase the debts, then it gives you a clearer field. You don't have any hangover from the debt. So that can be done, but that's not a guarantee. Bankruptcy is one of the few things where I can tell a client what will happen as soon as they come in, because as you probably noticed with this program, the rules are black and white. There's nothing really to challenge in a bankruptcy. If I represent someone in personal injury case or workers' comp or even Social Security disability, I can't tell the person how the case is going to wind up, but in bankruptcy, I can. You file it, you go through the procedures, and you're all set. So this has been Attorney Joe Fieschko talking about bankruptcy. Give me a call if you want to look into it, and thanks for listening.
All right. Let's come on in here, stop that, and